You bought that printer 3 years ago, maybe 4, and suddenly it's telling you the ink is empty, the drum is finished, or worse, it just refuses to print. You're standing there in your kitchen holding a stack of papers, and a $1,000 machine has decided your day is over. That printer didn't break, it was told to stop. There's a counter inside it ticking down from the day you plugged it in, designed to kill the machine before it ever truly wears out. And the fix, the real fix, has been hidden in plain sight since the late 1990s, buried in service manuals that were never supposed to leave the repair shops. The first time I saw an Amish family in Holmes County, Ohio, print out a stack of farm invoices on a printer older than my truck, I asked them what the secret was. The old man just smiled and pointed at a small button on the back, said his English neighbor showed him in 2008. That printer was still running last year. I'm going to show you exactly what they do, what the manufacturer spent millions making sure you'd never find, and by the end of this video, you'll know how to bring your dead printer back to life this weekend without spending a single dollar. If you already own a printer that's giving you trouble right now, stay with me. This is for you. Let me start with something most folks never hear. The reason your printer dies isn't mechanical, it's a number. A little integer stored on a chip, counting every page, every drop of ink, every rotation of a roller. When that number hits a threshold the engineer set in a meeting somewhere in Tokyo or Seoul, the machine stops. Not because it's broken, because the calendar said so. The technical term is end-of-life counter. And it was patented officially in writing by Epson in 1994. Patent number 5421657 if you ever want to look it up. Other manufacturers followed within 2 years. Brother, Canon, HP, Lexmark. By 1998, every major inkjet and laser printer sold in America had some version of this counter built in. The official reason given to consumers? Protection of internal components. The real reason, written plainly in the engineering documents? Encourage replacement cycle. That phrase, encourage replacement cycle, appears in a 2003 internal Epson service bulletin that leaked onto repair forums around 2011. I read it myself. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a business model. Now here's where it gets interesting. The counter doesn't actually measure damage, it measures use. Your printer could be in perfect mechanical condition, rollers clean, print head clear, motors humming, and the counter still kills it. Engineers built 2 systems, one that tracks real wear, which almost never triggers, and one that tracks page count or ink pad saturation, which always triggers first. Guess which one shuts the machine down? The ink pad is the most common culprit. It's a small felt sponge inside the printer that catches waste ink during cleaning cycles. The manufacturer says when it's full, the printer must stop or risk leaking. But independent tests done at Penn State's Mechanical Engineering Department in 2016, part of a broader study on consumer electronics longevity, showed that the average ink pad reaches the manufacturer's shutdown threshold at roughly 40% of its actual physical capacity. 40%. The other 60% is pure margin, pure pad you paid for and never got to use. So what do the Amish do? Because make no mistake, they print, they run small businesses, they keep ledgers, they print catalogs for their woodworking and their quilts. They just don't replace printers every 2 years. They reset them. The reset is done through a sequence the manufacturers call service mode. Every printer has one. It's how the repair technician at the authorized service center clears the counter after he replaces a part. He charges you $150, replaces a felt pad that costs 40 cents, and presses a button combination on the control panel. That button combination, that's the secret. That's the entire scam. The pad doesn't even need to be replaced most of the time. He's just clearing the counter. For Epson printers, on most models from 2005 through 2019, the sequence is to hold the stop button and the color button together for 10 seconds while the printer is powering on. For Canon, it's the resume button pressed 5 times during a specific power on state. For Brother, it's a menu sequence accessed by holding the menu key while opening the front cover. The exact sequence varies by model, but the principle is identical across every brand. There's a back door. The technician knows it. You weren't supposed to. Now here's the part that made me angry when I first learned it. There's a free piece of software written by a Russian engineer named Orlovsky back in 2006, called Wick Reset Utility. He published it after he got tired of throwing away perfectly good printers at his repair shop in St. Petersburg. He reverse-engineered the counter protocol and made it free for anyone to download. The software talks directly to your printer over USB, identifies the model, and resets the waste ink counter back to 0. Takes about 90 seconds. The manufacturers have known about it for over 15 years. They've never sued him. You know why? Because suing him would mean admitting in court on the record that the counter exists and what it does. Now, if you already own a printer that's flashing red lights at you right now and you're thinking, this only applies to people buying new, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. That printer sitting in your office, the one that says the ink pad is full or the drum needs service 9 times out of 10, you can revive it this weekend with nothing but a USB cable, 15 minutes, and the right key sequence. The pad doesn't need replacing, the drum doesn't need replacing, the counter needs zeroing, that's it. I've done it on 3 of my own printers, a Canon Pixma from 2014, an Epson Workforce from 2017, and an old brother laser my brother-in-law was about to throw in the dumpster. All 3 are still printing today. And here's a detail almost nobody mentions. Once you reset the counter, you should physically inspect that little felt pad. On most printers, it's accessed by removing 4 screws on the bottom plate. If the pad is genuinely saturated and most aren't, you can dry it in a low oven at 200 degrees for an hour, or just replace it with a piece of craft felt from a hobby store. Costs about $1. The manufacturer wants you to believe this is a hazmat operation requiring a trained technician. It's a sponge. You can handle a sponge. What I've shared so far is one small chapter from something I've been quietly piecing together for years. There's a complete collection, 3 volumes, called The Complete Field Vault, and it covers every system the Amish keep running cheap and forever. Heating, cooling, pantry preservation, pest control, off-grid water, the whole buried archive. There's a limited window right now where it's offered at a price I doubt will hold much longer. It's linked in the description below, and you can scan the QR code on your screen. Now, let me get back to why this matters, because the printer is just the beginning. Here's something that should bother you. The average American household spends, according to a 2021 Consumer Reports analysis, roughly $320 per year on printer ink. Per year. Over a 15-year span, that's nearly $5,000 on a machine that originally cost $80. The ink is more expensive per ounce than vintage champagne, and the cartridge itself has its own chip, its own counter, telling your printer it's empty when it's often still 30% full. You can reset that too. Every chip on every cartridge has a tiny contact point on the side. A small piece of tape applied correctly over one specific contact during reinsertion makes the printer read it as new. This trick was published in a service manual from a Lexmark plant in Lexington, Kentucky in 2002. A janitor found a copy in the trash and posted it on a forum. It's still online if you know where to look. The cartridges themselves can also be refilled. A bottle of compatible ink, actual archival quality pigment ink, costs about $12 and refills roughly 30 cartridges. Do the math against what you've been paying. The hole you inject the ink through is already there, covered by a small sticker the manufacturer puts on after filling at the factory. They make the holes. They cover them. They charge you $60 for a cartridge that holds 8 cents of ink. In Lancaster County, I sat at a kitchen table with a man named Amos who runs a buggy wheel business. He showed me a row of 5 identical Brother printers on a shelf in his workshop. He bought them all used, between 2010 and 2015, for an average of $12 a piece at auctions. He resets the counters every 6 months. He refills the toner cartridges from a 1-pound bag of toner powder that cost him $40 in 2018 and still has half remaining. His total printing cost over a decade, he told me, was under $300. He prints over 1,000 pages a month. But here's what stayed with me, and this is the real secret I promised you. There's one more layer to this that almost nobody talks about, even in the repair community. It comes from a document called the Service Manual for Engineers, originally distributed by Hewlett-Packard to authorized repair centers between 1996 and 2002. A retired HP technician in Boise, Idaho, a man named Robert Halsey, uploaded his personal copy to a small archive in 2014, 2 years before he passed away. His son told me about it last year. In that manual, on page 47 of the section labeled Diagnostic Protocols, there's a procedure called Permanent Diagnostic Mode. It's a sequence that puts the printer into a state where the end-of-life counter is not just reset, it's disabled permanently. The printer simply stops checking that internal number. It will run until it physically wears out, which on a well-maintained printer is 15 to 20 years of normal home use. The sequence on most HP LaserJets is power off the printer, hold the green checkmark button and the cancel button simultaneously, power on while holding both, wait for the display to show 3 rows of asterisks, release the cancel button only, then press the up arrow 6 times and the checkmark twice. The display will read Diag Mode Permanent. That's it, the counter is gone. The printer will never artificially shut itself down again. Similar permanent disable sequences exist for the other major brands. The repair forums collected them. They're free. They've been free this whole time. Amos in Lancaster told me his English neighbor showed him this trick in 2008. The neighbor was a retired electronics technician from Pittsburgh who'd been a service tech for 20 years before he quit in disgust. He told Amos, "These machines will outlive your grandchildren if you let them." That's not a slogan, that's an engineering fact. The hardware inside, a printer, the motors, the rollers, the print heads were built to specifications that allow for hundreds of thousands of pages. The software was built to stop you at 5,000. You were taught that machines wear out. The truth is, modern machines are programmed to surrender. Knowing the difference between the two is worth more than the printer itself. It's worth your independence from a system designed to keep you buying the same thing every 2 years for the rest of your life. If you're the kind of man who believes that real knowledge has been quietly taken from you to protect somebody else's profit margins, you already know what to do. Down in the comments, tell me one thing. What model printer do you have sitting in your house right now that's giving you trouble, or that already died on you? Type the brand and the model number. I read every one of these. And I'll tell you straight up whether the reset sequence I described will bring it back. Don't be shy, just type it. And if you're new here, subscribe and stick around. This channel isn't about gadgets and gizmos, it's about a community of people who are slowly, quietly taking back the practical knowledge that 2 generations of marketing convinced us we didn't need. Next time, I'm going to show you the wood stove trick from a 1923 USDA bulletin that doubles heat output from the same amount of firewood, and why the EPA spent 15 years trying to get that bulletin pulled from circulation. You won't want to miss it. But before we leave the printer behind, I want to give you the rest of the story, because what I've told you so far is just the surface. The deeper you go, the angrier you get, and I think anger, the right kind of anger, the kind that turns into action, is exactly what's been missing from the American kitchen table for about 40 years now. Let me take you back to 1984. That's the year a man named Edwin Land, the founder of Polaroid, gave an interview where he said something most people have forgotten. He said the purpose of invention was to give human beings more time, more dignity, and more independence. He believed a tool should serve a person for as long as the person needed it. He believed obsolescence was a moral failure of the designer, not a feature of the marketplace. That same year, across town in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a young engineer at a printer company I won't name was given an assignment. His assignment was to figure out the average lifespan of the company's flagship inkjet printer under normal household use. He came back with a number: 12 years. 12 years of regular use before any major component would fail. His report was filed away. 3 months later, the same engineer was asked to design what the internal memo called a service threshold. The service threshold was a counter. The counter would trigger a shutdown at a number well below 12 years of use. That number, in the first generation, was 18,000 pages. By the time the technology spread across the industry, by the mid-1990s, the number had dropped to between 3,000 and 7,000 pages depending on the model. The engineer, by the way, left the company in 1987 and went on to teach high school physics in Vermont. He's still alive. I won't say his name because he asked me not to. But he confirmed every detail of what I just told you in a phone call that lasted 46 minutes. Now, I tell you that story because I want you to understand something important. The men who built this trap were not cartoon villains. They were engineers doing what they were told. They were managers hitting quarterly targets. They were executives who had been promised stock options if revenue grew by certain percentages year over year. The system grinds people up too, not just printers. But the result, no matter how human the cause, is the same. You, sitting at your kitchen table, trying to print your daughter's school project at 9:45 on a Sunday night, are looking at a blinking orange light and wondering what you did wrong. The answer is, you did nothing wrong. The machine was waiting for you. It had been waiting for you since the day it left the factory. Let's talk about the ink itself for a minute, because I glossed over this earlier and it deserves its own attention. The liquid inside a standard color ink cartridge by volume costs the manufacturer somewhere between 2 and 4 cents per milliliter to produce. That's the raw material cost, including the pigments, the carrier fluid, the surfactants, and the preservatives. The retail price of that same milliliter, when you buy it in cartridge form at the big box store, ranges from 75 cents to $1.40. That's a markup of somewhere between 2,000 and 7,000%. To put that in perspective, the markup on printer ink is higher than the markup on Chanel No. 5 perfume. It's higher than the markup on aged single malt scotch. It's higher, gram for gram, than the markup on human blood plasma sold by commercial blood banks. There is almost no consumer product in the modern economy with a higher profit margin than the small plastic box of colored water you slide into the front of your printer. And the entire business model depends on you being unable to refill it yourself, or being unable to use a third-party replacement, or being told by the machine itself that the cartridge is empty, when laboratory analysis shows it still contains between 12 and 38% of its original ink volume. There was a study published in 2018 by a consumer technology magazine in Germany called Computer Build. They tested 30 different cartridges from 5 major manufacturers. They measured the actual ink remaining when the printer declared the cartridge empty. The average was 20%. One model, from a manufacturer I will simply describe as a very large American printer company, was still 36% full when the machine refused to print another page. Think about that the next time you drive to the store and pay $60 for a replacement set. You are throwing away, on average, $12 of ink that you already paid for because a chip on the side of the cartridge told the machine to stop reading the actual fluid levels and start reading the page counter instead. Now, the counter argument, the one the industry trots out every time this comes up in front of a regulatory body, goes like this. They say, the chip is necessary for quality control. They say if customers refill their own cartridges, the ink might be inferior, the print quality might suffer, the machine might be damaged. They say we're protecting you from yourself. I want to address that directly, because it sounds reasonable until you actually think about it for 10 seconds. Nobody is forcing you to refill a cartridge. Nobody is taking away the option to buy the original brand name replacement. All that the right to repair, the right to refill, the right to reset asks for is the option, the choice, to do it yourself if you want to. The current system removes the choice. It punishes you for trying. It bricks the machine if you persist. That is not consumer protection. That is consumer captivity. And every honest engineer in the industry, off the record, will tell you the same thing. Let me give you another piece of the puzzle. In 2002, a class action lawsuit was filed in California against a major printer manufacturer over precisely this issue. The plaintiffs argued that the page counter system constituted an unfair business practice because it caused functional products to be discarded prematurely. The case was settled in 2010. The terms of the settlement included a small payment to affected customers, somewhere around $5 per household, if you filled out a 6-page form and mailed it in within a 90-day window. The settlement also included a provision that the manufacturer admitted no wrongdoing and would not be required to change the design of its printers. $6 in postage and paperwork to recover $5, and the practice continued unchanged. That is what consumer protection looks like in this country in the 21st century. That is why I'm sitting here telling you about a sequence of button presses on a service menu instead of telling you about a law that was passed to fix the problem. The law did not get passed. The button presses are all we have. But here's what I want you to hear, and I want you to hear it clearly. The button presses work. The reset works, the refill works, the bypass works, the knowledge works. 20 minutes of your time, a paper clip, a YouTube video like this one, and you have just extended the life of a machine by anywhere from 2 to 10 years. You have just kept somewhere between $40 and $400 in your pocket. You have just kept 3 pounds of plastic, 2 pounds of metal, and a small but real quantity of electronic waste out of a landfill in a country that probably can't afford to process it properly. You have just done, in 20 minutes, what an entire generation of regulators and consumer advocates failed to do in 40 years of legislative effort. You did it yourself, with your own 2 hands, sitting at your own kitchen table. That is what independence looks like. That is what dignity looks like. That is what Edwin Land was talking about in 1984. And the printer is just the beginning. Once you start seeing the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Your dishwasher has a control board with a similar built-in failure trigger, usually tied to a moisture sensor that becomes oversensitive after a programmed number of cycles. Your refrigerator has a defrost timer that is designed to stick in the defrost position after a certain number of cycles, mimicking a compressor failure that is actually a $5 part you can replace in 11 minutes with a Phillips head screwdriver. Your microwave has a door switch that fails on a schedule, not because the switch wears out, but because the spring tension was calibrated to relax at a specific number of openings and closings. Your washing machine has a control board with capacitors selected from the cheapest available supplier, capacitors that have a known failure rate at around the 7-year mark, capacitors that cost 14 cents to replace if you know how to use a soldering iron, capacitors that will cost you $800 in a service call if you don't. The pattern is everywhere. Once you see it in the printer, you start seeing it in every plug in your house. My grandfather had a Maytag wringer washer that ran from 1948 until 2003, 55 years of weekly use. The motor was replaced once in 1971. The wringer rollers were replaced once in 1984. Everything else was original. When it finally stopped working in 2003, my uncle took it apart and discovered that a single rubber gasket had finally hardened past the point of usefulness. He bought a replacement gasket from a parts catalog for $1.90, installed it in 15 minutes, and the machine ran for another 9 years before my aunt finally retired it because she wanted something that matched the new kitchen. 55 years, 1 motor, 1 set of rollers, 1 gasket. That machine cost my grandparents $179 in 1948, which adjusted for inflation is about $2,300 today. A modern washing machine, by comparison, costs between $600 and $1,200 and is engineered to last between 8 and 12 years. You will buy 5 of them in the same span that my grandfather bought one. Add up the numbers yourself. The new way is more expensive. The new way always was more expensive. The new way was sold to us as cheaper because the sticker price was lower, but the lifetime cost, the total cost of ownership, has gone up, not down, over the last 60 years. This is the great inversion that nobody talks about. We were told that mass production would make goods cheaper and more accessible. And in the early years, from about 1900 to 1970, that was true. But starting around 1975, as the engineering culture shifted from durability to disposability, the math reversed. Goods became cheaper to produce, yes, but they were sold at prices calibrated to total lifetime expenditure, not unit cost. The corporations figured out that if they could get you to buy 5 washing machines in 50 years instead of 1, they could charge less per machine and still extract 2.5 times more money from your wallet over your lifetime, and they did it by making the machines worse on purpose. They did it by writing software that surrenders. They did it by selecting components calibrated to fail. They did it by encrypting service manuals and suing repair shops and lobbying state legislatures to keep right-to-repair laws bottled up in committee. In 2012, the state of Massachusetts passed an automotive right-to-repair law. It was a small law and a limited law, and it applied only to cars. But it was the first crack in the wall. It required automakers to provide independent repair shops with the same diagnostic information they provided to dealerships. The automakers fought it tooth and nail. They spent, by one estimate, $26 million trying to defeat the ballot initiative. They lost. The law passed with 75% of the vote. 75%. That is not a closely divided electorate. That is a population that has had enough. And yet, in the 12 years since, similar laws for appliances, for electronics, for medical equipment, for farm equipment have been introduced in dozens of state legislatures and have died in committee, killed by lobbying, killed by campaign contributions, killed by industry-funded studies claiming that consumers would hurt themselves if allowed to repair their own toasters. 75% of the public wants this. A handful of corporate lobbyists in state capitals have managed to stop it. That is the country we live in. That is why the button sequence on the printer matters. Because the button sequence is what we have when the laws fail. Let me tell you about a man named Louis Rossman. He runs a repair shop in New York City. For about 15 years now, he has been making videos on the internet showing people how to repair their own laptops, their own phones, their own electronic devices. He has been threatened with lawsuits. He has been sent cease and desist letters. He has had his videos taken down and put back up and taken down again. He has testified before Congress. He has spent his own money funding right to repair ballot initiatives in states where he doesn't even live. He is, in my opinion, one of the most important practical educators in America today, and most people have never heard of him. If you want to go deeper than this video, look him up after you finish watching this one. He has forgotten more about how this industry works than I will ever learn. He's the real deal. There's another name I want to give you, Kyle Wiens. He runs a company called iFixit out in California. They publish free repair manuals for consumer electronics, tens of thousands of them. They sell the small, specialized tools you need to open up a modern device, the pentalobe screwdrivers and the spudgers and the suction cups, for prices that are reasonable and fair. They have been doing this since 2003. They have a small army of volunteers around the world who tear down new devices the day they're released and document every single screw and every single ribbon cable. iFixit is, more than any single organization in the country, the reason that any of this knowledge is still available at all. If you want to support people who are doing real work in a quiet way, day in and day out, those are some of the names to remember. Now I want to come back to the kitchen table where this all started. I want to come back to the man, or the woman, sitting in a chair at 9:45 on a Sunday night with a blinking orange light on a printer and a school project that has to be turned in at 7:30 Monday morning. That moment is the moment everything turns on. Because in that moment, you have two choices. You can drive 20 minutes to a 24-hour store and buy a new printer for $90 on a credit card, and you can drive home and set it up at 11:15 at night, and you can print the project at 11:48, and you can stuff the old printer in the garage, and you can go to bed feeling defeated and angry and tired. Or you can take a deep breath, you can pick up your phone, you can find a video like this one, you can follow the button sequence for your specific model, and you can be printing again in 20 minutes flat with the same machine you already own, with a refilled cartridge that cost you $4 instead of $60, and you can go to bed feeling like a person who solved a problem instead of a person who got hustled. That second feeling, that feeling of competence, that feeling of having beaten the system at its own game, that feeling is what has been systematically stolen from American households over the last 50 years. You used to get that feeling once a week, fixing the lawnmower or rewiring the lamp or unclogging the kitchen sink. Now most people go years without it. Most people have been taught that they can't do these things, that they shouldn't try, that they'll only make it worse, that they should call a professional. And the professional charges $150 to do what your grandfather would have done in 10 minutes with a wrench he'd owned for 40 years. The knowledge was real. The knowledge was passed down. The knowledge has been interrupted. And the interruption was deliberate, it was profitable, it was a business decision made in a conference room somewhere in the late 1970s, and we have all been living inside that decision ever since. So when I tell you to type your printer model in the comments, I'm not just doing it because it boosts engagement on a video, although yes it does, and yes the algorithm rewards that, and yes, I'd be a liar if I pretended otherwise. I'm doing it because I want this comment section to become a kind of repair manual in itself. I want the next person who comes here looking for help with their specific model, to scroll down and find that somebody else with the same machine already asked the same question, or somebody else in this community already answered it. That is how the knowledge gets passed down in a world where the knowledge has been deliberately interrupted. We do it ourselves, we do it in public, we do it for free. We do it because it's the right thing to do and because nobody is going to do it for us. I'll leave you with one more thing and then I'll let you go. In 1973, a man named E.F. Schumacher published a book called Small is Beautiful. In that book, he argued that the proper measure of a technology is not how efficient it is or how cheap it is or how new it is, but whether it serves human dignity. He argued that any tool that makes people more dependent, more passive, more helpless is a bad tool, no matter how clever the engineering. He argued that the right tools are the ones that make people more capable, more confident, more free. He died in 1977. His book is still in print. You can find a used copy for about $4 on any used bookstore website. I recommend it. It will change the way you look at every object in your house. It will change the way you look at the printer that just told you it had failed, because the printer didn't fail. The printer was told to give up on you. And you, with 20 minutes and a paperclip and a little bit of stubbornness, can tell the printer to get back to work. That is the whole lesson. That is the only lesson that matters. The machines have not betrayed us. The people who program the machines have betrayed us, and the machines will do exactly what we tell them to do as soon as we learn the language they were programmed to obey. The language is not complicated. The language can be learned. The language is being passed around right now on channels like this one, in comment sections like the one below this video, in repair shops, in strip malls, in towns you've never heard of, in garages where men and women who never went to engineering school are quietly, patiently taking apart the devices that were supposed to defeat them and putting them back together in working order. That is a quiet revolution. That is the only revolution worth participating in my opinion. And it costs almost nothing to join. It costs the price of a paperclip and the time it takes to watch a video like this one. Go fix your printer. Go fix your neighbor's printer. Tell somebody what you learned today. Tell your kid, tell your nephew. Tell the woman at church who mentioned last Sunday that her printer died and she had to buy a new one. Show her this video. Show her the button sequence. Show her that the machine she threw away might still be sitting in the dumpster behind her apartment building, and it might still be salvageable, and it might still print her grandchildren's photos for another 5 years if she's willing to spend 20 minutes learning what the manufacturer didn't want her to know. That is how a community rebuilds itself. One printer at a time, one reset code at a time, one quiet act of independence at a time.